Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today we're going to talk about something that is interesting. It is solar, it is wind, it might even be a couple of more things. Who knows? We're talking to John Coffman, and John's company is called Commercial Solar. He is working with Martin Navales of Solend Technology Corporation in the Philippines. And by the way, John is currently in Oklahoma. So, hey, welcome to the show, John.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate you having us. Pleasure to join you.
Yeah, great. And I noticed that, since the name of your company is Commercial Solar, I don't want people to confuse with John Weaver's company. He's the commercial solar guy, even though you're also a guy. And John's a friend. I've been on some other podcasts with him, like the Clean Power Hour with Tim Montague. So anyway, let's talk about this new thing that you're doing. And I just wanted to put it out there that I'm a grumpy old traditional rectangular solar module guy. I'm just stuck in 1954 when Bell Labs came out with the solar module. So it might be a little bit difficult to convince me about something that just seems too good to be true.
I certainly understand that, and I appreciate the opportunity to try.
Uh-huh.
I certainly grew up just like everybody else on solar panels. I've seen solar panels that are 150 watt and on up to 550. And the one thing that stays constant is if you're doing rooftop solar, there are going to be some roofs that, for whatever reason, are just not a good combination for solar. Whether they're covered in shade, whether they pass engineering and have the space to provide enough power for the house.
Maybe they have holes in them.
Maybe they have holes in them. I live in Tornado Alley, and so we typically get a new roof about every 5-6 years. And so it's not really that case for us, but for the rest of the country, if the roof doesn't pass inspection and then all of a sudden they're going to be spending another $20,000, $30,000 for a roof, sometimes solar deals are lost because of that. That and the time it takes for permitting. We have a very, very simple product that is planted much like a tree would be. It is a hybrid combining solar and wind power, and it's a tree. It's a beautifully decorated solar wind turbine power tree.
Do you need to put Christmas lights on it?
You know what? It actually works well to have some landscape lighting with some colored lights shining up. The solar panel branches are white. And the reason that that was decided was so that the colored lights could be shown up on the limbs and you can make it very, very pretty. But you've got 6 feet that is buried into the ground, cemented in. And then the tree from the ground level goes up, and the first set of branches, the first 5 branches are at 9 feet, the second set at 11 feet, and there is a wind turbine on top that tops out at 13 feet. So it's not going to be in the way, and it's going to be up high enough so that, shading from other houses or trees, that just isn't an issue. And then as far as the wind, I never really listened to the weather other than is it going to rain or is it going to sunshine? But since this has this wind turbine, it has literally been 25-mile-an-hour winds all day today in Oklahoma City with gusts to 35 miles an hour. I even have some video of it. But these wind turbines were gauged at a 5-mile-an-hour wind for 5 hours. We have literally had 25 to 40-mile-an-hour winds over the last 2 weeks for 12 to 14 hours at a time. So the wind turbine aspect is something that has me just giddy. But that's what we have. We have a hybrid power tree combining solar and wind technology.
At first, when I was talking to you about this, I was wondering, is he spinning the solar cell? So it's a separate wind turbine that's sticking up there. How high does it get, like to the top of this tree, the top of the wind turbine?
The top of the wind turbine is going to be 13 feet. And
can you put a basketball hoop on it? I mean, we're talking about the Philippines here too,
I'm glad you asked that because they are wind rated to 100 miles an hour. We've been hearing all about these tornadoes that have been destroying towns in Oklahoma and other places. And there was an F2 tornado earlier in the week with wind speeds 115 miles an hour. So if a tornado hits rooftop solar, ground mount solar, or a solar power tree, you're going to be calling the insurance agent anyway.
I'm going to be calling the Wizard of Oz.
Well, that too, but they're very, very sturdy. And the solar panels are made by Maxeon, just recently ranked in a CNET article, #1 solar panel manufacturer on the planet.
Yeah, and let's even take a step back there, just talking about Maxeon. That's formerly known as Sunpower, and then Sunpower split off and they made Maxeon the manufacturer and Sunpower the installer. And I know that Sunpower has been in the news itself, not Maxeon, having a little bit of financial trouble, but that is not Maxeon. Maxeon is the manufacturer that makes these super efficient, high quality solar cells and have been known as being like top of the line for decades.
25-year power production guarantee that states it's guaranteeing 92% of first day production 25 years from now. That's unheard of. We are so thrilled to be partnered with Maxeon.
Another thing about Maxeon too is they do have a lot of stuff going on in the Philippines. And I think their factories are still there. They have gone to different places for manufacturing and things like that, but they do have a lot of roots there in the Philippines.
They do, and that's where our hybrid power trees are manufactured. That is going to be a pivotal area. Maxeon's there, Solin's there, and we can literally serve the entire planet. I was talking with a girl last week, and she was in South Africa. I thought she was in England, but she was working in South Africa, and she told me that for 3 hours a day, they have no power. And to run a business where you have to plan around that 3 hours a day, she was very interested in the hybrid power trees because they've got wind and they've got sun. Another one of the partnerships that we have just signed is with a company called Skeps that allows us to offer financing for 10, 15, up to 25 years, and it's handled through the national banking system. So we're getting away with a lot of the solar lenders, which has been some recent news articles and events that have come out that, those exorbitant dealer fees are something that people want to get away from.
So Skips, is that what you called it?
It's called Skeps.
How do you spell that?
SKEPS.
Okay.
And they are a combination of 3 national banks, 3 national credit unions, and another financial provider. But they allow the pay over time module, but it's not just for solar. It's for home improvement specialists. It's for electricians. It's the way to finance projects in and around the house, solar and the like. And they have been a true, true blessing to get away from that solar lender model of the way that we all know it. One of the things that Skeps likes is we're not putting panels on roofs, and so manufactured homes is not an issue for us. They have criteria 660 credit score and up, and they'll go to 25 years. And so it brings some real world banking into this space.
So for me, one of the things that I would worry about is something like the price per watt. And I know that it would be a little bit different because you're talking about wind there. But just out of curiosity, do you know how many kilowatts or watts the power rating of the PV and the wind turbine?
Yes, and that's where we're going to have some variables. As far as the hybrid power tree, it is right in between 7.5 and 8 kilowatts. However, that wind turbine is the piece. Now, we would much rather under promise and over deliver, which, Sean, when you hear the musical Oklahoma and it talks about the wind come sweeping down the plains, well, you would think that Oklahoma is known for wind and it's one of the windiest places. It's actually the 29th rated state for wind, but yet we have a ton of wind. But there are places throughout this country that have a whole lot more wind than Oklahoma. We've got the 6th best state as far as sun hours based on 14-year weather patterns. But when it comes to wind, Oklahoma is not that high. There are much windier places throughout the country.
Okay, so that sounds pretty big. I mean, that's a lot of PV that you have there sticking up 13 feet in the sky with a wind turbine. So I'd imagine that there's a ton of engineering that would have to go on just for, where you can plant these things as far as like putting them 6 feet down. Is it really wide too?
Now, the base is 8 inches in diameter of steel. It is planted in a 10-inch diameter hole and then is concreted in with Quikrete. And while that's curing, electrician's helper is trenching over to the meter in the panel. The electrician is doing his work, and literally they can install 4 to 6 in a day. You think, well, that's quite a lot. The average house needs 2 different trees, and so they can do 2 at a time and can install, again, 4 to 6 in a day.
Wow. Okay. And so I was just thinking about like the lateral forces and things like that. So I'm sure you would have to have engineering that would be different for different soils and things like that. Like if you had a place that was muddy, I know that just PV on a pole mounts alone have a history of tipping over, when it's like windy and muddy and things like that. So I guess that would be another consideration. Is it using a particular brand of wind turbine?
That is a Martine question. I have seen videos on it. This is a second generation. First generation, there's a lot more bulking up to the steel, to the 8-inch diameter, to the panels, to the wind turbine, and so on. And I am very, very excited in seeing some of the production that comes out of that.
Yeah, I have a sailboat. It was called a Primus wind turbine, and I never really used it much just because a lot of people in the industry have gone away from wind because it's just really hard to make small wind work. It's like as the wind turbine gets huge, then it gets to be a lot more cost effective than when it's a lot smaller. And that's one of the reasons why you don't really see people doing small wind anymore. Plus, like their bearings and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. Do the branches of the tree, do they move or are they stationary?
They do not move. They are stationary. The only thing that moves is the wind turbine on top. The microinverters are in the base or the tree trunk, and then wires.
Is it using Enphase microinverters? I think I might have seen that when I was searching around.
Yes, and the Enphase battery system is the go-to battery. Everybody likes Enphase. Enphase is one of the best.
Well, I'm sure the people at Solar Edge don't like them that much.
I am a big fan of batteries in particular. I think that's where everything is going, from the electric vehicles that 29 automakers are going 100% electric 2030, to apartment complexes that if they don't have EV chargers, they're basically telling all those EV owners, hey, we don't want you staying here because we have not provided any EV chargers. I think we're going to see a whole lot of changes throughout society on ways that we conserve energy, how we can produce more, and in different ways. And so that's what I really look forward to.
Great. And so one thing too, as I was going to talk about, is UL. So the UL listing for PV is 61730. Does it have the UL 61730 or is it, UL for the PV?
That is another Martine question, and we can certainly get that. He is at the factory. They are putting together new videos, new optics, and I can't wait for that to happen. We are expecting our first shipment about the middle of June, and will be pre-sold out long before they arrive.
Cool. So it'll just be like you plant these 13-foot tall trees in your front lawn or whatever it is, your backyard.
I don't know if I'm going to put it in my front yard, but yes, it goes 6 feet down. And then the tree is actually 19 feet tall.
Oh, I was wrong. 19.
6 feet is going underground, cemented in, and then the tree will be 13 feet from ground level up. So it's tall enough to be out of the way. I doubt you're going to be playing basketball around it, but it's going to be producing power even when the sun goes down.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSean, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show.
So I've been speaking with people literally all over the world. I may have thought they were in London, but they turned out to be in South Africa.
And I have family there in South Africa.
No kidding. You just have family everywhere. But the one thing that I really like about the flexibility with these hybrid power trees is if there is a tragedy, if there is a hurricane, if there are tornadoes and there is no power, at least with the hybrid power trees and a battery, you've got power immediately. Different parts of the world, electricity means the difference for so many people. But we like the applications. We like the off grid capabilities. It's also grid tied. We want to have it priced so that it makes sense for homeowners. And on the wholesale side, we're looking at somewhere around $2.50 a watt on the retail and the homeowner level. That after installation, after all the incentives and so on, you're looking at somewhere around 350, 360 a watt. But it is something that's brand new.
And when you say per watt, is that just for the PV part of it?
Oh no, that's PV and wind turbine. So I mean, it's in the ballpark. It's something new, and I think a lot of people it's going to be the perfect situation. People that don't want solar panels on their roof, people that live in an area that typically always has wind. There's a lot of options out there.
Okay, well, I'll try to keep myself with an open mind because it does sound like too good to be true. And some other things too that I've just seen in the past that were too good to be true also were solar windows. And that's just because you want to look through a window, and if light passes through it, it doesn't work out so well. And it's just hard to compete too with these mass produced rectangular old fashioned Bell Labs style modules, but bigger than Bell Labs, of course. I've seen colored solar at these different solar shows where they put color on top of it. And that means it's reflecting away some different spectrum of light depending on what color it is. I've seen artistic solar where it looks like they're putting the Mona Lisa on there. In fact, I'm sure they could put the Mona Lisa on there. So that's sort of like part of the colored solar. And then there's that thing that was on YouTube for a while. I'm sure it's still there. You might have heard of it. They go solar freaking roadways, and they had solar in the roads. And so it's like, it's hard enough to keep our pavement together. That was kind of my thing about that. I think they were using Enphase microinverters too. And then I remember about like 17 years ago, there was all these articles about people that were saying like, oh, pretty soon you're going to be able to just paint the solar on the side of your house or your garage door. And we had all these customers that were not buying solar because they're saying, well, next year I could just paint it on. It's not a big deal. There's something else too that's, I guess, would be one of your competitors. I thought they called it the sunflower or the smart flower. You probably know about that. It doesn't have wind on it.
That's more of a commercial application, and you're looking at considerably more money. It's a great product to have outside your office building. You can have a station to power up your iPad and your phone and a place to meet and have lunch. And you're really talking about apples and oranges there. But yes, those commercial type large flowers that may be a good option for EV chargers and a place to meet, but we're kind of at a lower price point than some of those.
Okay. Yeah. And so that was that smart flower or sunflower, which was like it comes out and blooms and tracks and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure that the price per watt, it's not going to be much more than, I mean, it's an art project that makes electricity, I should say. So it's not going to be competitive. Like you were saying, 350 a watt installed, something like that. That would be amazing if that comes to be true. And then the last one that I've heard, and it's not too long ago that I heard this about people saying that they're going to have solar that works at night. And I'm just like, okay, solar that works at night, where's the energy coming from? There's not energy coming out of the sky at night, or, unless you talk about starlight or there's low energy radio waves, whatever, but it's not going to be like the sun coming down at 1,000 watts per square meter, something like that. I guess you could say that your solar works at night because it has wind turbines on it, huh?
Well, my bedroom is up on the second floor, and I can always hear the wind whipping around when the wind's up. And yes, you'd be making energy, generating your own power all night long here lately.
And so another thing too about the small wind is it goes faster and you have different types of maintenance. So you would have to change some bearings and get up there. I went out to, I think, yeah, I was in Arizona where they were making the Primus wind turbines. They're nice people that were running that company when I met them. And they showed me how to take it up and down. And it was kind of a big process. Like it was up a lot higher than 19 feet. And they have this tower and they have all these winches and things and they drop it down. And to do that, you got to do maintenance on the bearings and things like that. And then if it gets too windy, then they'll have to slow down and things like that. One thing that's kind of amazing about wind and those aerodynamic forces is that when you double the speed, you get a lot more power. It goes up by the cube. And so doubling the speed gives you 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 times the power every time you double the speed. So you quadruple the speed, that's like 8 times 8, that's 64. And you get so much power to a certain degree that the wind turbine can fall apart if it doesn't have brakes on it. So they have to have, different ways of slowing it down or changing the angle of the blade and things like that. There's YouTube videos out there with some of these giant wind turbines where they go out of control and they collapse and fall apart. They just spin too fast.
Ironic that you mentioned that, because literally about 3 summers ago, it was 108, 110 degrees here. And I was probably about 30, 40 miles west of Oklahoma City. And it was a day without a cloud in the sky, 108, 110 degrees, just full sun.
Wow.
And from where I was, I could literally see 100 wind turbines, and not one of them were spinning. And I thought, there's got to be something associated with that, because there was a wind, but I couldn't understand why 100 separate wind turbines were not spinning.
Uh-huh. Yeah, another thing too, sometimes it'll be to save the birds. I know that some of the first wind turbines that were put up in the United States were in California on Altamont Pass, which is not too far from where I am. And there's certain times where it's the best wind and they have to make them so they're not working because there's like raptors nesting and things like that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was definitely one of those that was watching the eagle couple at Big Bear that I don't think they hatched. But, I am very interested in not only saving the raptors, but the planet as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, good for you. Well, let's see, John, is there anything else that we need to cover right now?
Well, I tell you what, you can get everything on our website, which is commercialsolar.biz, commercialsolar.biz. I would love to speak with any person that is interested in providing the hybrid power trees. We think that this is going to be the next thing.
Great. Well, thank you so much, John Coffman of commercialsolar.biz. Thanks for being on the podcast. It was fun talking to you and being just kind of fun and loose, and I enjoyed our conversation. And I wish you all the luck, and I hope that you prove grumpy old traditional rectangular framed with aluminum framed solar modules that people like me, I hope you prove us wrong.
Well, Sean, it was a pleasure being on your program. We'll have to check back with you soon.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. And thanks for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Get yourself NABCEP certified. Take some of my classes. Check it out. SolarSean.com. Woo!